Welcome to the third installment of our 2016-17 Scholars to Leaders series. Thank you for coming. I know you guys are probably, a lot of you, smack dab in the middle of midterm, so I'm glad you came. And I hope that there was enough pizza that you had a healthy lunch. I'm going to put my glasses on right now to introduce my friend, because I wrote this from my heart, so I don't want to miss any words that I wrote this morning. It is my great honor to introduce our November guest speaker, Professor Boyi. There is so much that I can say in praise of him that it's hard to know where to begin. I first met Professor Boyi back in 2001 when I was working in the Department of French Studies. It became very clear, very quickly to me, the impact he had on students, faculty, and staff alike, and that they all had such great respect for him. Professor Boyi had been a teacher at the University of Burundi, but after the catastrophic events that leading to genocide in Rwanda and Burundi in 1994, he came to Canada and to Western's Department of French Studies. A fact that cannot be repeated too much about him is that Professor Boyi has spent the last 20 years at least inspiring others, and on our campus and beyond.
I'm going to start shouting. The impact of his dedication to others is evidenced by an already impressive roster of awards he has received for his work in purely helping others, including the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Award, the Western Humanitarian Award, the Community Service Learning Award, and the Marilyn Robinson Award for Excellence in Teaching. When the national call went out for the RBC's 2015 Top 25 Immigrants of Canada Awards, it was immediately on the radar of those of us who knew Professor Boyi that recognition was meant for him. So he was nominated, and of course he won, most deservedly. The award recognizes people who have come to Canada and have made a positive impact while living here. Professor Boyi will have a lifetime contending with the trials and tribulations of updating constantly his Canadian Common CV, which is a sticky technical nightmare for most professors, because he has years to go before he will stop adding to his outstanding roster of humanitarian achievements. There could be no better person to talk to you about understanding the culture of leadership than Adi. Please help me in giving a warm welcome to my friend, Professor Boyi.
Thank you, Paula, for that wonderful and generous introduction. As you heard, I've known Paula for many years, and since we met in 2001, I think our mutual respect and interaction and everything has been going on unceasingly, and I'm really very honored to be here today to share my views on this topic, which is quite dear to my heart, whether it is in my classroom, whether it is outside the classroom, in the community, with friends and all the people I meet. I believe that leadership is a topic that we need to stop and reflect a little bit about, because we talk about it, we use it every day. We are always talking about the leaders and the leadership, and in the end, I don't think a lot of people understand even when they keep using it. Right? We don't really understand exactly what we mean. I say a little bit more on that. So it's a great honor, and thank you so much, Paula. Thank you everyone for being here. So the topic today is understanding the culture of leadership. One question we can even ask, is there a culture of leadership? Could we maybe say cultures of leadership? If we say that, maybe we won't even know the boundaries of what we are talking about. again, leadership is involved and entailed by many areas where we work, many areas that are part of our daily life, especially our activities as students, as scholars, as professionals, and of course, when we talk about communities and countries and the world in general, the word leadership, the word leaders keeps coming back to us. And again, we'll see that it's really not an easy word that people can understand, or that we take our time to understand exactly what we mean. I want to start with this quote by Nelson Mandela. Everybody knows when we talk about leaders, world leaders, true leaders, Nelson Mandela would be maybe the person who would come to my mind the very first, of all the leaders I've heard in my life. And he links leadership. He's talked a lot about leadership. He's talked about a very interesting African philosophical term that they call Ubuntu, which means humanness, humanity, caring, interrelationships. And he's developed that with Bishop Desmond Tutu. And this is now a topic that is being taught in the universities, in different faculties, especially in the social sciences, but also particularly in what is now emerging as experiential learning or community service learning. Education is the most powerful weapon which we can use to change the world. Education. We are in education as professionals, as students, as educators. We are in education, and education is the key if we really think of developing our communities, developing our human world. Education is at the center of that endeavor. And Nelson Mandela talked a lot about education and has committed himself in many years, even before, you know very well his history, before he went to jail, his commitment to education and to fairness and to human rights were really the most important thing. And does everyone hear me? Am I speaking loud enough? Yes, in all corners. If I don't, do you think I need a microphone? Yes. Okay, thank you. I will do that. Maybe I'll just make gestures with only one hand instead of both of them. So look at the next quote here. I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I am afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. Alexander the Great. Yes, we know very well. We've heard about so many leaders who are dictators, who are real lions, and who take their people for just a sheep that they can either even massacre and put in prison and torture and so on and so forth. So here the metaphors of sheep and lions are quite interesting for us to reveal what we know in the everyday life. I'll come back to that while I'll be talking about the world leaders, what we think of world leaders. And leaders are not born leaders. Let's put that fact out there. Leadership is learned. We learn about leadership, be it at home, be it at school, be it in every activities where we are involved as community members, leadership is learned. And we have to be consciously aware that we are doing the right thing that really will lead us to leadership. Leaders are not born. If we believe in that, we've seen in the world people, the royal successions, the dynasties, where the king will be succeeded by their sons and sometimes their daughters. But we know very well, even today, that there are very common people like all of us. When they get there, they want to do the same thing. They want also to take themselves for royals. It's in many third world countries this is happening, where every single president of a country thinks that the only person who can replace them is their son, which is a shame. And of course, they don't even care about the turmoil and sometimes even the wars that this can produce. And each leader has their own style, their own way of expressing their identity, their own ways of expressing their views of the world, of the community, of development, of leadership in their own communities. Which really will bring me, before I even go a little bit further, which will lead me to believe that we should all sit there and reflect, maybe on our own first, and wonder what kind of leaders we are. I believe if you want to, everyone can be a leader. And I hope everyone is a leader. And most of the time, which even what I prefer, we are not even aware of that. We don't have to be aware of that. We don't have to be told that we are leaders in order to be leaders. When we talk about qualities and characteristics of leaders and see that quite a bit of it, you hold it, you have it already. You have it in you, each individual, in your own families, in your own little communities of friends and neighbors and everything. You have those qualities. You may not be aware of that, but you definitely do. And maybe that's even what helped you get to where you are today. And we don't need anyone to really convince us that we are leaders or we have to be leaders. We have to convince ourselves first. And you'll see that in what's going to follow, you'll see that something really very important, that we tend to think that leadership is in titles and positions. It's not. It's not. Let's be think a little bit critically. It's not. And most of the people we call, if we look at the definitions, accepted common definitions of leadership, a lot of people will think they are leaders because they are up there. Really, they shouldn't even be there. And that's almost universal. And it's up to us as scholars, as young people, I'm not among those, but as you are growing intellectually and personally, it's really important to get to that point where you question those things, where we don't just call people leaders because they are in those high positions in the country or in the community. Let's look at who they are and what they are and what they do for others, for themselves and for others. Yes, the term leaders, again, is commonly used every day, everywhere. If you've been listening to the media of all kinds these last 3 days, you've heard that term used abundantly. You've all heard about the death of the Cuban leader. Notice that I've used the word leader myself. The Cuban leader, Fidel Castro. And really, I like to listen to the radio when I have time. It's just incredible what the world has been saying. The entire world has been saying about the death and the person of Fidel Castro, who was definitely considered by many, and maybe most people in the world, as a true leader, but who at the same time has been, there are facts there, has been a true dictator too, and really put people's lives, a lot of people's lives, in danger, and some people even got killed. Some were forced into forced labor in military camps, and so on and so forth. And some were thrown or helped to go through the ocean to reach Miami, and a number of them ended their lives in those waters. Yet again, you talk about today, if you listen to the radio again and you hear what the people are saying about Fidel Castro, it is just amazing. It is just amazing. It's for most people in his country and a lot of people in the world. Mind you, I am originally from Africa, and Fidel Castro is a true leader for almost anybody in Africa. Because he did a lot. He did a lot to help African countries and African leaders. So now, again, if you listen to the media, there are lots of African heads of states who are in the Cuban arms. So before I continue, again, we keep using that word here, common uses of the term leaders. Rescue me here for that mistake. I said of term leaders. No, it's not term leaders, because it means something else, but the term itself, leaders. Which again, from the very beginning and even at the end, I will ask you to keep reflecting on that word and our own usage of that word. We talk about community leaders. We hear that all the time. And they are true community leaders. And maybe that's the rubric, the category of people I respect the most. Community leaders in the world, not only the ones we know, in the world, have done marvelous things to improve the lives, to better the lives of their people. Business leaders, that's maybe even more commonly used and more commonly respected. Political leaders, we know that. We hear that all the time. Political leaders, all the people who are in different cabinets and the heads of states, all our heads of parties, we call all of those political leaders at different levels. And sometimes, again, if we stop a second and reflect on it, are they really leaders? Are they there for their people? For all their people? Do they care about them? Are they fair? Are they caring? Are they responsible? Because we should talk, maybe at the end while I'm concluding, I'll talk about leading responsibly. Are they responsibly leading their people? Do they have a vision, not for themselves or their bank accounts in different financial havens in the world? Are they really caring about their own people? Academic leaders, yes. we are in an academic environment. What do we do to deserve to be called academic leaders? You are all scholars. A lot of you will be, have started your path towards academic leadership, towards being not only just scholars, but also educators, professionals in the field of education, where you'll be helping young souls to grow as complete human beings, as people, again, who have a vision, otherwise they wouldn't go too far. A vision for themselves and a vision for the world around them. And do we, when we are in the classroom as teachers, or when we are sitting somewhere doing research, do we really think of ourselves as leaders? I'll keep asking more questions than maybe the answers that I will give. Do we know, do we keep in mind our own responsibility in front of the young people whom we want to be the leaders of tomorrow? I really believe that if we are not aiming at creating leaders, education is not worth it. It's not worth it. If we have a vision, every individual in our classroom, if we don't help them develop the qualities that we see here, think about the needs and the interests of their community, of others, and if we are not encouraging them to do the best they can do, if we are not supporting them to really get the best out of what they do, if we are not making communication between them and ourselves and teaching them how to communicate with others for the interests not only of themselves, their own interests, but the interests of others, we are missing the point in terms of what I would call education. And I think we miss that point when we are in the classroom or out of the classroom, or when we are dealing with colleagues who do the same thing. If we think that our colleagues don't have the same vision or are not working towards that goal, something is wrong over there too. So I believe it's really important that we be cognizant, we be conscious and self-conscious of what we are doing in our own profession of education. And every single student in my classroom, I should see him and or her as a leader, a potential leader. And it's my role to help them really grow as leaders. And some of the qualities will come back to them when we talk about the characteristics of leadership. If we talk about honesty and integrity and fairness, everyone needs to have those. Everyone. I sometimes tell my students that some of the advice, or different pieces of advice, of encouragement and support I give them, that I say, sometimes I say, last night I was telling the same thing to my children. I shouldn't see a difference between, when I'm really talking to my students, I shouldn't see a difference between my own children and the children, the students who are in front of me in my classroom. I shouldn't. I shouldn't be just fair to my own children and ignore the children of the others. That's not leadership. That's not leadership. And I want to be doing my job as I really should. Let's look again at this word itself. And we find in the Bernice and Nemes this nice quote that really, I've read it a few times, and it helped me, and at the same time it intrigued me. Leadership is one of the most observed yet least understood human phenomena. Practically each generation has come up with its own definition of leadership with varying points of emphasis. The second part of it is okay. I'm okay with it. And I think that's where we should go. The world keeps evolving. Yet, the first part is concerning. We talk about it, as I said from the very beginning. We observe it. We keep talking about the leaders and the leadership. But really, rarely do we take time to really understand exactly what it is and how it works in our own environment, in our own communities, in ourselves, in our own inner selves. What is leadership? And I think we have to start there. If we don't know who we are and what we are as individuals, And here, if I move to what I would call definitions of leadership, again, a lot of people have done research on the topic. Leadership is a reciprocal relationship between the leader and followers, where there has to be trust, interdependence, interconnectedness, mutual understanding. I'm really back here. I could use the same words to describe what I called maybe the most profound philosophical term in African languages and in African cultures that they call Ubuntu. Humanness, humanity. Do we really think about our own humanness as we relate to other people? Not just for ourselves. And that's what interconnectedness, that's what interdependence and the mutual understanding and the mutual caring is all about. It's about the others. I've repeated to my students a few times and maybe many times that really as a human being, myself, I'm only worth what I am for others. I'm only worth what I am for others. Otherwise, I'm not worth anything. Aristotle will advocate that trust and virtue as ethical categories will be the main definitions of what he called leadership. And I'm sure you've read, I go back to show to Aristotle, I could even go back before Aristotle, just to show you that it's not just today that we are reflecting on leadership. It's always been a very important topic of discussion and reflection. And human excellence lies in actions. Leaders don't need to be in those high positions and holding those powerful titles. That doesn't show us anything about leadership. It is in the character. It is in the actions. Sometimes true leadership is even in silence, in total silence. Because what we need is not words, it's not, again, appearance, it's really character and it's ethics. And of course, as you know, a lot of leaders, a lot of people, the people we call leaders, are very good at communicating. communication. Communication is one other important, especially when we think about our role in the community, in the communities. Communication with the people we work with, the people we work for, the people we live with is extremely important. It starts anywhere, wherever we are. It could be in the classroom, it could be at home, it could be with the neighbors, there is no communication if we are not really aware of what our role, and if we cannot communicate our wisdom and share our wisdom with the people around us, we are missing something about our leadership. There has to be a goodwill to communicate with others and to really, especially to think about the needs of the community and share it with others, and not just think that we are the only ones with the strength and the knowledge and the skills to lead the community along. I think I put the remote somewhere in my pocket. Remind me, otherwise I will go home with it. Again, when we are talking about community, I want to include something that is very, very important to me, especially in my work, in my courses. When we talk about intercultural leadership or intercultural competence, intercultural learning, and so on and so forth, it's really something very important, especially, again, in the realm of education and of helping younger people grow and be themselves and be worth for their communities, be worthy for their communities. Darla Diodoff has written a lot about what she calls intercultural competence. She's done a lot of research, and she's maybe the most respected scholar in this area. I've seen some people who have done experiential learning and community service learning here and abroad. Here, my friend Jen. So the intercultural competence, which really helps us do, again, the best we can do to our communities. And how can we do the best we can do if we are not aware of who the others are, if we are not aware of what the needs of the communities are? We are no longer at these periods where we would go to different communities and tell them what they need, impose the needs onto them instead of listening to them. I'm using the word listening, which is extremely important in terms of leadership. You will never have a true leader who is not capable of listening. This is one of the top requirements for a leader. And we have to be very sensitive to cultural diversity today. Whether we want it or not, if we want to do a good job and we want to be successful, we have to be sensitive to cultural diversity. Otherwise, we are wasting our time. Let's not even talk about education. It's impossible. If you are not aware, if you are not self-aware of what sensitive or sensitivity to that diversity is, we will be failing our mission as educators. There is no possible communication with our students, the community of our young people, anywhere in the world today, or even other people and other communities outside the field of education. So Darla Diodov has, again, done a lot of research in this area. She's the president or director of American International Education at the Duke University. And she's been here, actually, even a few times here at Western. So it is clear, and I'm just repeating the obvious. I'm repeating the obvious when I say that today we work in a variety of cultural settings. Some people may not be aware of that because it doesn't matter what's there, but we have to be aware of that. And we work in an increasingly globalized world. It's a fact. We have no choice with this. It is a fact. So leaders, when we say that the leaders have to strive to be world-wise, it's being world-wise is being aware of what the world is today and what the needs of people around the world are today, which wouldn't maybe be the same 100 years ago during colonialism and so on and so forth. And there are dilemmas, there are conflicts of worldviews, of interest, and so on and so forth. But those dilemmas and conflicts can be reconciled again through our wisdom, through our own understanding of what the world is all about. So in business or in other areas, how do we meet the multiple demands and needs of our customers and so on and so forth? I have just a second here. The leaders need to acknowledge their own cultural identity and understand the possible bias that could arise. That can happen to the best of us. It can happen to all of us. So we have to be aware. We have to be aware of who we are before we can even work hard to know who the others are. Again, back to what I would call the interface of education and leadership. William Fulbright was a senator in the 60s and 70s in the US. Somebody who's done a lot. He was a politician, but he did a lot for the world, not just for I must say that you've all heard about the Fulbright Scholarship. I must acknowledge that I had it for 6 years. 2 years in Madison, Wisconsin, and 4 years at Cornell University. I was among the very fortunate people who benefited from a man who believed that this world leadership will rise from people who really have in themselves, in their own minds and hearts, the benefits and the needs of mankind. He went further. Again, his Fulbright Scholarship are given to everywhere in the world, everywhere in the world, all countries in the world. 1 or 2 people per year can benefit from the Fulbright Scholarship, can get a Fulbright Scholarship to go study in the US or Americans to go work outside. This is again back to the very definition of leadership. This is interconnectedness, interrelationships, interdependence among people around the world. Otherwise, why do we call ourselves or call some people world leaders? if they don't know the world. Isn't that really a misnomer in itself? I'll just go to the second quote here. The essence of intercultural education is the acquisition of empathy. I hope no one here confuses empathy and sympathy. Sympathy might be part of empathy, but that's not what people need. People don't need sympathy. If we want to serve people, we want to serve the world, we need empathy. We need to understand what's going on and see what we would do if we were in their shoes, if we were part of those communities. The ability to see the world as others see it. This is not an attitude that we often see from the West, especially in relation to others. And to allow the possibility that others may see something we have failed to see, or may see it more accurately. I advise you, a number of you certainly will be, and hopefully most of you will be teachers sometime, or some of you are already teaching. I think it's even starting from our own classroom as teachers, it's important to help our students and to understand that our students may see things that we fail to see, may understand things that we fail to understand, and that's what really will help them grow as scholars, as educators, as leaders later on. I've made some allusions to world leaders. So we can't talk of leadership without really mentioning world leaders. Again, look at, I told you that Fidel Castro was extremely, now we can say was, 3 days after his death, he was a true leader for almost the entire Africa and in many other parts of the world. Some of you here may be also from Latin America, and they know, you would know that he was extremely respected in Latin America. And the entire Latin America is mourning today. And again, we know what the US, until today, even today after his death, a lot of people in the US still, I would say even that, from what I've heard, there are lots of people who are very happy he's dead. But again, what a leader is and what a hero is, maybe he would never die. Yeah, I'm repeating what you know, heroes never die. And he's been a hero for so many people. And let's not forget the fact that he was a true dictator and he killed lots of people. He made the lives of a lot of people in Cuba very miserable. So we have to look at these things very, very critically. Of course, here you can see that he was a big supporter, a big anti-apartheid supporter. He really joined world leaders again to work against apartheid and to push to the end of apartheid. And this is even one of the areas where he did not agree with the U.S. leaders. And of course, I said something about Mandela. You see Mandela again with. You'll see Mandela with all leaders in the world. Maybe because of what he went through, he was, after he left the prison of Robben Island, he was the most acclaimed and accepted, and even until today, a leader in the world. And Yasser Arafat, who yes, some people did not agree with Yasser Arafat, even those who worked with him, but he did a lot to try to solve problems in the Middle East. Where there is a Rabin, they did, both of them getting a Nobel Prize, Peace Nobel Prize, but still, we see where we are. Again, we can go back to what leaders do. You see where we are in the Middle East today. It looks like nothing has really been done. And of course, there are leaders. Let's keep in mind the fact that all heads of states in the world are called leaders. And they hear that every second of their lives. They hear that from their own people, their followers. Ms. Johnson, Dr. Johnson here, who is the first woman head of state in Africa. And knowing what Liberia went through, she really came up as a leader and tried to reconcile a country that had been molested really for years of civil war and torture and all kinds of war crime. And of course, Angela Merkel from Germany, she's a leader. She's done a lot, and at one point, until recently, the things changed until recently, she was really admired as a European leader, a true leader in contemporary Europe, more respected than any other head of state in Europe. I say until recently because we know very well that she has, especially with the flow of Syrian refugees and what followed, and things changed. Her popularity seemed to change, but I still believe that she did an admirable act to open the borders for Syrian refugees. And of course, if we talk about world-class leaders, we have Martin Luther King, we have Gandhi, we have many others, and J.F. Kennedy here, who was not a particularly good friend of Fidel Castro. I don't even know how Fidel Castro survived him, even maybe, you can draw your own conclusions. Just a second. I want to say a word about the role of the West in the classification of world leaders. When I said earlier in the beginning that we don't stop to reflect on what we call leadership, even though we use it so much, we use that term so much. Other people, we allow other people to define that for us, which is not really, as scholars and intellectuals, that's not what things should be, what things should be like. We should be able to critically have our own understanding of who is a true leader in the world or around us. Edward Said, some of you may know this man, who himself is a true leader in his own area. If some people here are in the social sciences or humanities, arts and humanities, you know that he's the leader, the leading figure, the leading scholar in post-colonial theories and post-colonial studies. He's not second to anyone else. I should maybe mention also that at one point he was a representative of the PLO of Yasser Arafat in North America, in the US and Canada. And for him, our own definitions of leadership is really inspired by the relationships, I would say even the divide between the West and the Orient. And those who have read or heard of Orientalism, for Edward Said, Orientalism is really the rest of the world. It's the rest of the world. It's not just the Orient. It's not just the Middle East. It's the entire world. And he reflects on the freedom and liberties and rights of other human beings as they position themselves towards, or they are positioned towards the West. And the West, mainly, in his mind, he often had not only Europe, but also, of course, even though he was living, he's always lived in the West himself. He knew what he was talking about. He was talking about the US. So, Orientalism, according to Said, again, according to his disciples, is a Western style of restructuring, dominating and restructuring authority over the rest of the world. Not just the Orient, because we really don't know, we don't know the limits, the boundaries of what we would call the Orient. Here, when I talk of internal characteristics of leadership, I'm really referring to who we are, individually. If we are leaders, what are we as individuals? Not just, not what other people tell us that we are. What do we have those characteristics that will, in our inner self, that show that we are responsible human beings, that we have the vision and the purpose to serve others, and that we are leaders, we are individuals with a human empathy and compassion. Yes, and do we work hard for the unity among the people around us, or we do the opposite, and so on and so forth. So there has to be motivational, emotional, and ethical intelligence or behavior in all of us in terms of being recognized as, just a second, being recognized or recognizing ourselves as leaders. Most of the time, as I said before, true leaders will not really think of themselves as leaders. They don't have that time. They don't have that time. But it's good to reflect. Am I compassionate enough? Am I fair towards the others? Am I, through my actions, am I fair to others? Am I honest if I do such and such a thing? Am I honest? Am I capable of going out there and tell the others that I was not as, I didn't act responsibly? Let me conclude. I think I've talked quite a bit. Let me conclude with I will just conclude, I think. I will just talk. Just a minute. I will just. You can read the last paragraph, but I will conclude by saying that leadership, and here I'm talking of responsible leadership. Responsible. That word is extremely important. It's really what we can do, what we think we can do, and what we strive to do to better the world. Keeping in mind that it's the responsibility of all of us to build bridges among people, among our communities, especially today that the world has become a small village, and to close those gaps that separate and divide us. And I wish that we will all, in our own working environment, in our own circles of friends, our families and neighbors, we will all do our best to strive for that responsible leadership I've been talking about. And I thank you very much.